All right, I think we can start. Welcome, everyone. So we will begin very soon, and we will be streaming on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitch, and Facebook. So if you know someone who wants to attend, feel free to invite them here or to any of the other platforms. And also feel free to scan this QR code to ask your questions and answer the polls that we prepared for you. All right, I think we are ready to begin then. Today we have Emily as a speaker who will tell you about her experience in MVP planning and execution in B2B products. And just a little bit about me, I'm a product management consultant at Product People with experience in product management, product design, marketing, and consulting. And just briefly about Product People and what we do. So our mission is to help companies discover and deliver great products faster, and we empower our product management community to share knowledge generously while managing the hands-on work of a product manager, product owner, ops, or product leader on a fractional basis. And we also onboard fast, align teams, and deliver outcomes thanks to our in-house team. And we also curate free events like this one for one of the biggest PM communities in Europe that has over 33,000 members. And first, let's do a quick icebreaker before we start the session. And we have one question for you. You can open slido.com and enter the number that you see on the screen. Also, you can scan the QR code. And for the ones watching on other platforms, feel free to share your answers in the comments. So our question for today is, when planning an MVP for B2B product, what do you find to be the most challenging aspect of it? A, managing the expectations of multiple stakeholders. B, ensuring data security and compliance. C, balancing customization with scalability. D, gathering meaningful feedback from early adopters. Or E, integrating the MVP with existing systems. So feel free to take a moment to think through the questions, and shortly we will announce the results of the poll. I'm curious to see what people will answer here. Let's see, Emily, how it will tie to your talk. Also thinking what I should choose myself. All right, I think I should be getting some answers soon. Let's just give people a minute to think it through. All right, so I just got the answers. So the winner basically is that the most challenging part is integrating the MVP with the existing systems, and 63% of users gave this answer. Then the second one with 13% is gathering meaningful feedback from early adopters. And then balancing customization with scalability, ensuring data security, and managing expectations, it didn't get any votes. So the last 2 points are basically the winners, with the big majority going for option E. All right. Then I think without further ado, I'm happy to welcome our guest for today. It's Emily, who has over 8 years of experience in the realm of building B2B products. And Emily is our product management consultant at Product People. And I also had pleasure of working with her, so I know that she has a lot of interesting insights to share with you. All right, Emily, I'm giving you the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Ola. Am I sharing like a presenter view instead?
No, you're sharing the...
Okay, perfect. Then I'm just sharing I'm sharing the right thing then. Perfect. Awesome. So today we're here to talk about MVP, but I kind of figured this is a perfect start to a presentation on this topic, which is what is a minimal viable product? And I'm sure most of you or almost all of you would have seen this meme before, which is when a client asks you to build a horse, right? Do you build a full horse, or do you do you actually build something that's more like on the right side, which is just an outline of the horse? Like, how do you balance between the two, and what are the specific nuances you have to take into account? And I think one thing that is very important to note, especially on this topic, and we'll dive into the nuances of B2B in a bit, which is before you even decide, do you build a full horse or just the skeleton of the horse, right? Is to kind of think about this question of whether this is something that is a one-way door or a two-way door. And just to quote like Jeff Bezos, right? This is what he called a one-way door. One-way doors are type 1 decisions. Really, once you walk through it, there's no point. I guess there's no return, right? You can't really get back to how things were before. And versus two-way doors is really type 2 decisions. And these are kind of different, right? These are decisions that are changeable, reversible. So it's also mindful, you have to be mindful that, hey, once you walk past this door, you can actually back out of it. And the two examples within the context of Amazon are really AWS, Amazon Web Services. That is a one-way door. Once you build, that like cloud infrastructure, obviously it's kind of hard to back out of it. It's a lot of investment. Versus, for Amazon Prime, it kind of started as a very simple solution. If Amazon decided that, hey, they weren't getting the traction that they needed, they can technically walk away from it and just drop it. And I think something, you have to think about very, I guess, intentionally is that if it's some sort of like infrastructural decisions, right? Or even maybe like a hardware product that requires a lot of investment, or even like I like to say, if it's a payments product, right? Then I think things would look quite differently. So I think it's always important to bear this in mind when you're looking at MVP development. Awesome. So I guess with that teaser today, you probably would know that we're talking about MVP planning, the specific nuances and challenges in the B2B space, and also some best practices that you can take away with you. So let's start with an MVP overview. So I'm sure, as all of you would know, minimal viable product is really the definition of it is it represents the most basic version of your product that still delivers value. And the goals are pretty straightforward, right? You're there to learn about your users or your customers' real needs and preferences at a significantly lower cost, which goes back to the skeleton of the horse. And the second thing is also to drive out any risk of the current hypothetical business model by testing fundamental assumptions. And I think when I was kind of like preparing for this presentation, there are also like two kinds of MVPs that are important to kind of think about, right? The first one is validating MVPs. So what you're doing is a classic example, which is again back to the horse example I showed you, right? You're using a worse version of the product. Than what your final product would be to test the market, to kind of prove whether or not your model or your product would be successful. And then the other one is invalidating MVP. So I haven't done a lot of this, but then I think it's actually like quite an interesting difference to call out. And this is where you have like a very good version of your product, and really kind of the significance of it is different, right? Because failure means that your business model is doomed and really like you should not pursue it. So I would like to use two examples. So the first example, it's a classic Dropbox example. Drew Houston really just put together a video to kind of create this concept to see if like he was getting buy-in. And validating MVP, it's all about like selling the idea. And if it's not successful, then you can't really say that exactly, hey, this whole business model or this whole concept completely failed. It could be like other assumptions that cause it to fail. It could be maybe the wrong target audience. Maybe a video is not enough in Dropbox context. You actually need something that is of higher quality that a user can actually interact with in order for you to like prove that point. So it works a little bit differently. On the other end, for invalidating MVPs, the example that I would like to bring is I just like slipped my mind, but then it's like Rent a Runway. So it is this like company that actually built this concept where you can like rent these like runway dresses, right? And then they have this like crazy experience whereby you can actually like text a customer support person and actually get like highly customized experience, and at the end it actually fail. So that tells you that even though you've delivered a superior experience and like what the status quo is, you still ultimately didn't get anywhere. Then it kind of really questions the fundamentals of your MVP or your business model. And last but not least, on a quick overview of minimal viable product, I think it's important to note that I think sometimes I definitely have fallen into that trap of thinking that, you know what, I just need to build something that is feasible. But there's also another concept that I think has been brought up quite a number of times, which is minimal lovable product. And it really needs to check off, it has to be desirable, usable, valuable, and feasible. And then this is where you'll be able to actually get like the right results, or, I would say better results that would actually answer your question, because, it could be that your solution or your idea is actually worthwhile and there's a business case for it, but maybe it's not usable or valuable or desirable, and that makes it fail. So it's important to keep this in mind. Awesome. And in terms of MVP practices, I would like to kind of dive deeper into these like 5 points later, but I think we'll quickly go over them. So first of all, you obviously have to focus on core features, have to be very disciplined about, is that something that's must have, nice to have, right? Measure and analyze, you have to define what success or failure looks like in the invalidating MVP use case. And also like, don't just stop right after building the MVP, right? If you've defined the core features, then you have to figure out, kind of keep the momentum and build on top of it, and iterate on the MVP based on the feedback you get. Fourth is compromise on the UI when necessary. And last but not least, be ready to actually like sunset or pivot away from it. So we'll dive deeper into each of these points later on in the presentation. Okay, so we're here to talk about B2B in particular. And to start kind of this topic, I would like to at least like highlight the difference between B2B and B2C. And as Ola kind of mentioned, for me, like I don't have a whole lot of context in B2C because I spent my entire career in B2B. However, I think it's still ultimately like a spectrum, right? When you look at, on one end, there's like how B2C works, that's mass market. And in the middle, you have these like B2B SaaS. You're thinking of it, I mean, some examples would be like a Notion, Slack, right? Or any, I would say, products that are on the more of like a PLG motion that looks more like a hybrid. And on the opposite end, and this is where I see it as, these are more traditional enterprise products. You can think of it as like, they only have maybe several hundreds or thousands of customers. So like kind of how they operate is quite different. And so kind of what are the differences when you look at it? So on one end of the spectrum, when you look at building an MVP for B2B business, right? Usually you would typically start with just one user persona. And for sure, there will be a lot of, I would say, variability within that persona, but then you will have a very clear idea of like what that target persona look like. And on the enterprise side, it kind of looks a little bit different, right? And this is where you have a lot of different stakeholders, because imagine if you're selling, let's just say like a credit card solution, because that's what I used to work on. And the decision maker could be, if I'm selling a commercial credit cards to a business, really it could be either the financial controller or even the CFO. That is somebody that could make the decision of whether or not they use your product. And in between, there are people that are doing the research. It could be maybe the group financial director, or somebody that's like currently using the existing solution, right? Like those are the people that could influence the decision. However, they're not necessarily like someone that could actually make that call of switching to your product or buying your product. And on the end user front, then that could be employees that have your commercial credit cards, or people that actually manage the program on behalf of the company. So you can see that they're kind of usually like multi-layered. So you really have to like understand maybe the, I would say the interests, right? And the intentions of all the different stakeholders in order for you to actually build a product that will work for them. Secondly, in terms of complexity and quality, I think on the B2C side, and again, like don't quote me on this, but usability is a pretty big component, right? And you can probably sometimes, I would say like be okay with delivering something that is maybe like more half-baked, and then, but on the enterprise side, I think this is where some maybe reliability, customization, integration, and security become very important. And going back to kind of my example of like credit cards, in that case, when it comes to payments, right? Like, or a payroll product or even like a healthcare product, reliability is extremely important. Like having spent like a good amount of a career in payments, you definitely know that you cannot I mean, making a wrong calculation on like how much money you're sending to an employee, right, would have substantial impact on maybe somebody's lives. And on the security front, right, you have to make sure that no sensitive information is being leaked, especially in the healthcare context. And you also have to make sure that there's like good integration into any of the existing, whether it's like IT systems, right, CRM or financial systems as well. And on the tools front, given that B2C has a lot more, I would say, like users, right? Typically, then in that case, then you actually be able to experiment a lot more, right? Being able to A/B test because you have enough volume to actually like A/B test, and it doesn't take that much time. And also, you'll also be able to do a lot more like user testing, going on even like platforms like user testing to learn more about, I would say, test your prototype or learn more about your users. And going on the extreme end of like enterprise products, and this is where if you only have maybe several hundreds or at like a handful of thousand of enterprise customers, and this is where the user feedback collection is quite different, right? You have to like talk to the right users, and your sample size will be substantially lower. And on the stakes front, so on the B2C side, really, if you have a bug, maybe that's causing 2%, I guess, affecting 2% of the population, maybe it is okay, but again, it depends on the nature of the product. But again, going back to enterprise side, if you only have maybe several hundred of customers, then losing one, it could have a substantial impact on your revenue. So this is where stakes could be high if you fail to deliver on a feature that a specific maybe group of customers are expecting, and they can just like walk away, and it would hit your bottom line pretty quickly. Okay, so I think we already touched on some points around feedback loop. I think just to add on to it would be the feedback collection process, I would say, for B2B, more traditional enterprise side could look quite different, right? Because this is where maybe you have to go through, I've worked in a company whereby it's a marketplace, they have different account managers working with their customers, and you always have to go through like all these like layers in order to even like schedule a meeting with your customers. You can't just like recruit them through the platform. There's usually always these very, like, I would say, formal structure. It's either you already have a customer advisory board set up, then you can just tap into that. Or you'll have to kind of preemptively like set up a lot of meetings ahead of time so that you'll be able to collect that feedback in a timely manner and basically iterate on your MVP quite early on. And the second thing I also want to highlight is release cycle and flexibility. In that, given that on the B2C front, or even in the middle B2B SaaS front, you'll be able to conduct like A/B testing. Then and obviously, yes, there is a certain time and sample size that you have to meet, but at least generally, you will be able to collect a lot more feedback very early on, right? Then you'll be able to iterate on your product way faster. But on the more, I would say, traditional enterprise route, right? Like if you work in aerospace or even government or defense systems, it's taking a lot of time even for your B2B customers to even like test out the product because of the longer cycle. then you get the feedback slower, and then you also need to balance between like stability of your platform. You can't be like changing your platform all the time, since these are B2B users, they're familiar with a certain process. You maybe integrated your product into their existing system. So a lot of changes, I would say, definitely come a lot slower. So the overall release cycle is longer as well. Awesome. And I'll end this section with this one slide that I think actually summarize the user research methods based on you have a lot of data and kind of, I would say, what the nature of your product is. So you would see that on the B2C side, right, like it tends to kind of fall within, I would say, the upper right quadrant. You would see that there's a lot more A/B testing, usability tests that you can do versus, with a smaller sample size in the B2B world, then you're probably, even I think in the small business world I've done, where you're doing kind of more focus groups and interviews with your users or prospects. Okay, so now we'll switch gears a little bit to talk about some common challenges in B2B MVP development. So first of all is to define the core problem. And I think this kind of comes back to the fact that you have a more of a complex stakeholder landscape, right? And it kind of makes it a little bit more challenging. So kind of an example that I would like to use is maybe you're a company, a startup that is creating an enterprise resource planning system for small to medium-sized manufacturing companies, right? And you know that at least within their business, there are quite a number of pain points. There's inventory management, production scheduling, supply chain optimization, and financial planning, financial reporting, right? And your stakeholders really range from like operations managers that want better scheduling, your finance teams want better reporting in general. Then even within this manufacturing industries, you can even actually segment that further and like look into, well, even within this group, there are maybe like different types of manufacturing companies, right? Like, are they like electronics company, food processing, automotive, right? Because like maybe food processing is quite different in the sense that maybe the food is perishable, so they have a separate process or nuances specific to their industry. So even like finding commonalities across like across like all the variations of like the manufacturing companies could be quite different. Secondly, which is scalability and integration. And I know we kind of like touch on that a little bit. But basically quickly after your MVP has been built, right? You kind of need to quickly be able to, once you start gaining traction, be able to like scale your product and even like integrate it into any of the customer's existing systems. So one of the examples I would like to bring forward is in my previous company, I was working on a no-code data analytics platform. So we were a standalone product just to make sure that, hey, like we could get traction. And it was built upon, I would say, some use cases that are, I would say, like an existing enterprise product has, right? So initially, there's no integration between like these two systems, but we were able to, build like these like proof of concepts. I would say test our product using the standalone product, and you were looking at testing maybe data on like 20,000 or maybe like even like 80, 100,000 rows of data. But as soon as we actually start getting traction and we start bringing on like real enterprise customers, you're looking at like easily like 40 gigabytes of data. Like how do we actually scale our product from, like these like proof of concept handling maybe like at most 100,000 or 200,000 rows of data to like 40 gigabytes of data per run, right? So I think those are kind of some of the challenges that definitely we had to think about, or it becomes like difficult. And last but not least, I think we also mentioned that since the B2B cycle is a lot like slower, especially on the enterprise space, then it could kind of like slow you down and kind of, I would say, slow you down on your next iteration of the product as well. So what do we do with some of these like challenges? So going back to, I think the 5 points around like MVP best practices, right? I think the first thing obviously is to understand user problems. And given this, I would say, complex stakeholder, um, like this complex stakeholder, I would say, map, right? Then you really have to make sure that you understand the perspective of all the different stakeholders. So using my commercial credit cards example, and this is a product that has card and spend management capabilities, which means, hey, as an employee, maybe like Ola, you only get to spend like $500 per month versus I actually, because maybe I'm somebody that's like client facing, I get to spend on alcohol, but then like Ola I can't, right? So in this example, then maybe from a CFO, financial director, decision maker level, like they really care about maybe the value that they're getting, right? And at least in the, I would say, a North American context, usually credit cards either comes with like cashback or rewards points. Then in this instance, then you kind of really need to show, what is the ROI of this product to the decision maker. Versus in this case for influencer, I just put down like IT manager or the program administrator. Then from their perspective, you really need to understand, okay, well, how exactly is this, maybe all the card data, transactional data is going to flow into their system? What is their workflow so that it's easier for you to convince these influencers to support the switch to your product or support buying your product? And last but not least, I think end user, this one I always find a little bit tricky because typically you may not be in touch with them. But in this case, you also need to understand from a cardholder perspective, like what do they need, and how you can work with them as well. And secondly, I think to help you understand user problems, given that you won't always be able to talk to the right people, right? That you won't be able to, likely, I haven't had a single actually time when I'm able to talk to like all three types of like key stakeholders. And this is where you also can leverage the expertise you have within your company to bring in, the right cross-functional teams with like really deep domain expertise, so that they can at least like offer you perspective from different angles so that you can collect requirements and from all angles. Secondly, which is to focus on your core features. And I think this is where it could be tempting, right? To address every single use case that emerged like during discovery, especially I think in the B2B context, it's hard to even like find a lot of commonality, especially in the enterprise route. And so I think this is where you kind of need to make sure that your MVP is very focused, right? Manageable, is also like capable of delivering tangible value to early adopters without being bogged down by complexity. So how do you do that, right? The first would be to educate your stakeholders, because I can tell like even internally in a company, sometimes you have these people that are, they work with a client day in, day out. They really understand their pain points and they're trying to like advocate for, all of their customers' needs, right? But I think educating and managing expectations and letting them know that, look, we're starting with this, right? This is the first version you're going to see. And then and being able to share the roadmap of like what comes next and kind of like be able to like negotiate would help you maintain momentum and support as well. And also at least get buy-in if things don't pan out, which obviously happens quite often. Secondly, I think it's also very important to strike a balance between, ongoing discovery and also delivering something, right? And so I think being kind of very disciplined about, all right, well, as long as you collect enough evidence, then maybe build something that's like pretty cheap and then like learn from it and iterate from it faster, while you continue to do discovery is also something that would help you develop an MVP that is kind of focused and manageable as well. Okay, so next one is measure and analyze. And kind of this is where I think it kind of goes back to where you're, I guess like what type of product you're working on, right? So at least in the enterprise route, it's like super helpful to even like, before it, I think even during discovery, right? Like you definitely would have either customers that are in your customer advisory council, or customers that are interested in like what you're building, then you can even kind of get them to provide you feedback very early on, so that you can at least basically understand what are the negotiable and non-negotiable things in the MVP. And also, I would say that something that's like also super helpful is that sometimes, especially with enterprise products, like it takes a long time. It could even take a month to even schedule a meeting, right? So if you can plan ahead, that will also help you accelerate and measure and get feedback a lot sooner as well. And what do you do after you you build the MVP? So after you collect some feedback, then definitely don't stop there, right? It's kind of like a continuous process. So as soon as you kind of get your first customer feedback, then you can basically have to like act on it pretty quickly, and making sure that you have that, I would say, feedback loop, and also I would say iterative development cycle kind of aligned, so that you can continue to build on the momentum. And secondly, I think I also touched on this earlier, which is planning for scalability. I think depending on the product, right? It's either your product needs to be able to support like a way bigger scale, but you also need to make sure that you're planning ahead with your marketing team or customer acquisition or sales team to kind of build on it. Maybe you start with a small market, right? That's more localized, but then you also have to like make sure that you have the distribution channel set up as well. And last but not least, which is you also have to be ready to sunset or pivot, right? Obviously, if you're getting like good evidence, right, good feedback, which I think chances like based on the MVP, or I guess like based on the A/B testing kind of failure rate of like 80 to 90%, right? Like there's a very high chance that your MVP would fail. So it's very important to not be married to the idea and define success metrics upfront. And this is where you have to be very disciplined about, okay, well, I define these as like success metrics. Am I meeting these success metrics? And if not, then what's happening, right? What can you learn from it? And you have to make a decision as to whether or not you pivot, or you continue to like iterate on it and like test another assumption. So an example that I would like to share is that when I in my previous company, we basically built this no-code data analytics platform, right? And in addition to having that be part of the broader offering of the enterprise product, we're also testing a product-led growth motion. So our hypothesis at the time was that maybe there are smaller scale businesses, right, that are maybe data-driven. They're struggling with Excel, but they also want to leverage something that's more powerful. Potentially, maybe they would be interested in machine learning and AI capabilities, which is what the product was like built on. And we were kind of like looking to, I guess, like validate whether or not like this market exists, right? And we had no product market fit. And we set a goal of saying that, hey, we need at least like 10 users of the same persona. They're willing to even like co-create with us, co-create a product with us in order for us to define success within a quarter. So me and my team, we actually tried like everything we could. We went to like small business events. We tried affiliate marketing. We tried like everything we could like think of, even like cold calling, quite a variety of things. And at the end, I think at the end of the 3-month period, there are kind of three things. Like one, we did not get any patterns in our users. We're able to drive a lot of traffic into the product, right? So if you purely look at like acquisition, sure, we're doing very well. However, we're also not getting 10 users of the same demographic, or the same persona that we define, which is these like smaller startup data-driven companies, and not even within the same, I would say, like industry, right? So we knew that we're not getting enough. So it's either maybe the target persona that we set initially, or we hypothesized would be a good fit, is not the right, I guess, like target group, or that maybe the entire business model kind of just, I would say, does not have a business case behind it, or there's no need in the market. And what we ended up doing is at the end of my term, like we actually decided that, hey, look, like the team is exhausted. We ran out of ideas. And we just decided that maybe we learned a lot from it. We learned how to like optimize our marketing funnel, use this as a testing ground, ran a lot of A/B tests. But we ultimately decided to sunset this project and like close off this work streams. And I think it's hard to say. It's definitely very hard to like close something off because it's your idea or it's something that you worked on like day in, day out for a period of time. But I think what's more powerful is to know when to walk away as well. With that, I would wrap up the presentation with this one slide. I think it actually very neatly summarizes like what the different mistakes that you make during an MVP development process, kind of depending on the stage. Yeah, and I guess I'll turn it over to Q&A. And I think I have to hand it back to Ola, right?
Yes, correct. All right, let me just quickly share my screen. Just if you could confirm that you see the slide with the QR code.
Yeah, I do.
All right, perfect. So yeah, thank you for your insight. That was a very informative session. And now, as Emily said, we are going to start our Q&A session. So please feel free to share your questions with us by sending them in the chat or commenting on other platforms. And you can also scan the QR code that now you can see on the screen. And while you send us over your questions, I will also share a bit more about product people. And I'll give you 3 more seconds to scan the QR code. All right, 3, 2, 1. You can still share in the comments. So let me first talk about the use cases when you want to work with us as product people. So our interim product managers and owners cover parental leaves, can scale your product management team quickly or lead key initiatives while bridging the gap until a full-time employee can join. We also cover parental leaves for 3 to 12 months on average or unstaffed permanent positions. And with us, you can also get temporary help to drive product discovery and delivery for a deadline and create big impact in a short time. And we can also help with coaching your product management team to reach their full potential through streamlining processes from 0 to 1, including product ops and product management. We can also assist you with running the discovery to uncover the next impactful initiative or product. And on this slide, you can see some of our B2C clients like Zalando, Tier, FreeNow, or DeepL. And when it comes to B2B, we work also with companies like World Health Organization, Ometria, Sastrify, and Elucidat. It's also worth noting that we supported over 300 cross-functional teams and 70 clients from Series A startups to publicly listed companies. And we also have 42 product leaders and product managers in-house to deliver high-quality services to our clients. And we also take pride in having 62% of women in the team with 66% in the leadership roles. With that being said, now I think we are ready to start our Q&A session. And remember that you can still keep sending your questions in the chat or through the link. So let me just take a look at the first question from the audience. And the first one is from Bola O. So Emily, there is a question regarding the measurement and analyze part. Is it for existing products or the new products? And I believe this is referring to the part of engaging with early adopters and establishing formal feedback loops.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely both. So I would argue that for existing products, it's certainly more straightforward, right? Like in the sense that you already have existing customer base. Chances are somebody would have some form of relationship, right? Whether it's support or account management that already knows your user, then you can definitely like tap into it very easily. Because even if you have an existing product and then you build on top of it, and you have an MVP of maybe like a certain feature, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be collecting feedback from there. And I think if you have an existing user base, and it makes it easier because you can just set up any product analytics tracking that would allow you to measure the performance more quantitatively, and you also have like a customer demographic information already. And on the new product front, I would say you should, especially if it's a new product, right? You should definitely try to talk to your users. And I can empathize with like how difficult that is because I actually worked on a product that we end up sunsetting, right? So, but it makes it more important because just looking at data, you don't really know how much, you don't know too much about your users, and without talking to them, you don't really understand their motivation. You can only like know so much. So I would say you definitely need to talk to early adopters, and establish formal feedback loop. I guess regardless of whether it's an existing or a new product.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Good answer, by the way. All right, and the next one is from Anton from Slido, and he's asking, how can I encourage users to provide feedback in my app? And he mentions that the red send feedback button didn't really work for him.
I think this kind of comes down to, and I think without knowing a lot of context, it is a little bit tricky for me to, I guess, I give a good recommendation of like which one would be helpful. But at least I've tried several things and I can tell you my experience with it. We've definitely done like a monetary incentive, right? We've told our users, we send them mass emails and be like, hey, if you complete our survey or like book a feedback session with us, then you would get like a $50 gift card, or I can't remember exactly, but then there's $50 value back, right? And that actually did not go super well. I think one, like, especially in the B2B space, you're looking at your users are super busy. Unless there's a lot of value to them, right? Maybe that $50 is not worth that much. And I think it also, secondly, it could attract the wrong people that are coming to, give you feedback, right? Because they're incentivized by maybe, like by the $50 gift card, but then they may not be representative of like who you're looking for. So I definitely would recommend against that tactic that we've tried. Another one that I tried that is semi-useful, definitely gave us like some interesting, I would say, feedback, which is through support. So especially for people that reach out to support, because we were, this is back to my PLG days, and like people that actually engage support are like somewhat invested, right? They're even like having a conversation with support and they're asking for help. So we would actually tell support to, at a certain point, right? Like encourage them to actually reach out to us. And like we have a Calendly link asking people to set up a demo or like a more deep dive. So they would actually, we're offering quite a bit of value to like help solve our, I would say, our prospects or our users use case. So I would say I actually was able to get like a good number. Not like a, it wasn't like a crazy amount, but it was like a decent number of users are able to, I would say, share their feedback, share the use case, and then I would say actually share how things are going with them. Another one that I've also tried is more proactive outreach, and this is where I can't speak to the GDPR or privacy laws in Europe, so it could work a little bit differently in this context. But we were actually also able to look at, based on usage, right, who are the frequent visitors, who are the return users and whatnot, and then we targeted, I would say, that group of users and like proactively outreach to them and also like send follow-up. So we were also able to get some users to talk to us that way. And I personally have been approached on like some other SaaS apps, like B2B SaaS apps on this as well. So I think it's not an uncommon approach.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I would also assume that the type of incentive to leave feedback depends probably on the product and also the context where it's embedded. Then the next question is from the anonymous user, and they are asking how to navigate strong stakeholder opinions that are not really rooted in customer research, but rather gut feelings. Yeah, that's actually a very good question. It's a very common use case, I would say, in our work.
I think it depends on what your stakeholder, like, I guess, philosophy is, right? I think for me, my style is always I'm definitely like a relationship builder, right? Then I think I would definitely like kind of always refer back to data. And I think that's definitely more tangible, right? Because maybe they have a very strong conviction on something and then they believe things like work a certain way. But then if you're able to provide like data and actual like customer, quotes, research that you're able to get and like prove them wrong, then I think it's like a lot easier to navigate the conversation because it's like plain and simple, right? That's at that point it's kind of somewhat like factual. It's a matter of like how you bring them along, while you're also doing research so that you're I guess you're also like taking into account like their opinions, but then at the same time, kind of I guess it's a very direct way of like, hey, look, this is not reality. But I don't know, Ola, you have anything else to offer on this front?
Yeah, I was actually thinking that there's also this framework, like confidence meter from Itamar Gilad, which is interesting, which is basically allows you for mapping the evidence based on how strong it is. So basically self-conviction, you can give it the weight of 0.1 because it's a weak evidence. If it's just a gut feeling, then maybe medium would be something like a user research, and then strong would be the actual launch data. So maybe this confidence meter framework could be one way to try to convince people.
Yeah, actually, I've done that actually. I've definitely worked on like a client whereby like I don't say that exactly, hey, like you're, self-conviction is like the lowest confidence, but then you're trying to bring in like this like thought leadership of, hey, look, we know that a lot of I guess our assumptions are based on like gut feeling, right? And then I introduce a wheel, and then I'll be like, oh, our goal really should be to get a stronger validation quantitatively and also like through customers. And I kind of like gently introduced, I guess, a new methodology that way, and it was pretty well received. So highly recommend.
Yeah, that's also a good way. But yeah, sometimes also a lot of feelings are involved. Maybe sometimes something is like a pet project of somebody and it's hard to convince them. But yeah, I get you. All right. Next question, in the interest of time, is from Johannes Zwilling. And he's saying, assuming we want to start with a problem first that a business has, as that should make the validation of the solution via an MVP way easier. What effective ways are there to become aware of valuable, concrete problems that business has and not abstract or very vague ones?
Okay. So, I'm assuming that like at least my understanding, and feel free to let me know if you have a different understanding, Ola. But at least my understanding is like what are effective ways to make sure to uncover these like valuable concrete problems that businesses have instead of very abstract and vague ones. Um, yeah, okay, perfect. So a good technique is the 5 whys technique that would really help you, I would say, get to the bottom of something. So this technique is really to say, maybe like an example of it. So you ask why 5 times. Maybe it started with maybe the delivery of this newsletter it's late, right? And you're like, why is it late? And they're like, well, it's because the development did not deploy it at the right time. And you're like, well, why didn't they deploy it at the right time? And the answer could be, well, like, because there's a new developer that didn't know the newest protocol and didn't know how to implement it. And you ask why again, which is, well, why is it that the new developer didn't know about this like new protocol that is implemented? And maybe the final answer you would get is, well, actually, maybe the CTO didn't believe that, there should be, like this kind of training is required or something like that. Then you're kind of peeling the onions and many layered onions, and then you can be able to like drill down to what the core business problem is. Because I think it's quite common, especially in user interviews or, I would say conversations. It's very common for them to just say, well, like this is slow, but you have to ask them, but what exactly are they trying to accomplish? What are their workflows? How do the different pieces like come together? I think if you're able to apply the 5 whys tactic, that would help you uncover, the most like concrete or core business problem you're trying to solve for as well.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I agree. I also think it's often useful to use the maybe opportunity solution trees to like kind of have a mind map of how certain problems and how we can solve them connect with certain outcomes. But I think the 5 whys is definitely also a good technique. All right, let's go to Oleg All right, 1 second. Now I have a question from Vish, and he's asking what are the prerequisites for a product manager to have from product leadership, different stakeholders? Like, do you think they should set a vision, like define the market segment, or what should be the role of leadership there?
Sorry, so it's my understanding correct? So whether like what are the things that product managers need from leadership?
Yes, I also understand it this way. So like from like the higher level, what would be your expectation from the leadership to define a product maybe? That's my guess.
Yeah, I think for me, honestly, it really varies by companies, right? So I think there are companies, they're definitely like a little bit more top down than, the company wide, they would define a vision, right? And there are like market segments that are maybe like potentially defined, and you're kind of really there to define the solution. And I think this is where even like product management roles could be split into more of a discovery focused role versus a delivery focused role. So I would argue that it really depends on your role. Is it like a combined both, or are you kind of more focused on one or the other? Because I think, in the example that I gave, then obviously you're just purely focused on like the solution and delivery side. You're more like a product owner to a certain extent, versus if you have more ownership over the, I would say, the market segment and vision, then you will have a lot more freedom to do what you want, or to at least like test different ideas and like work with the leadership on it. So I don't know if I can really say, and there's one size that fits all, because I think product management, I would say, is very different based on the company you work in, the nature of the product as well. I don't know if that answered your question, but because I've had experience in both, and I think in an ideal world for myself, right? I cannot speak for everybody, but like I definitely enjoy it where it's kind of like a white space. I can define, when I work in the PLG, I was the one who defined what the goal is, right? And like who the target market is. I hypothesize it, and I have to come up with strategies to basically meet this OKR. And I find it a lot more exhilarating. But certainly not all companies work that way.
All right, perfect. Thank you. I also agree that every company is very different, and especially as consultants, we see so many different organizations, and yeah, definitely not very hard to define one size fits all. And I think we can take one last question from Oleg, and he's asking a very broad question: how to develop strategy and roadmap in practice, and what inputs should be taken to develop a roadmap. And another part of the question is how can we predict time, which I'm assuming relates to the estimation of the product development cycle.
Yeah, so I think in terms of strategy development and roadmap development, I think it kind of like starts with like what your user problems are and what your user needs are. So like obviously the first line of, I would say the first input, right, would certainly be your would certainly be your maybe like customer feedback, or whether it's collected through, I think there are these tools like product boards, or I can't remember what else there is, but there are all these like different tools that you can like collect and aggregate your feedback, right? And then I think usually what, at least in the products I've always worked on, like it's either we will have feature requests from the customers, from like internal users, and then us as like product managers, right? Or even the leadership team, like everybody would have like inputs on like what those ideas would be, right? Because everybody have a different perspective and different priorities, and how you kind of prioritize them, it comes back to art. What is the company vision, right? What is your product vision? And you will be able to kind of take these different like ideas and see, which ones you have like higher confidence in, right? And this is where you kind of go into like prioritization of what problem you want to solve for, or which opportunity you want to solve for, and like narrow down, like prioritize that. And then you'll kind of go into, all right, for this opportunity, let's just use the example of there's an opportunity for you to streamline communication with your users. And within this this opportunity to streamline the communication with your users, there are also like different, I would say, like solutions, right? There are different ways that you can streamline this communication. Is it like to send the email faster? Is to have an in-app like chat feature, or it could be like other permutations of it. And in that case, like based on these solutions, you'll have to again do the I guess I've also used like the RICE framework, right? Like you're prioritizing them based on whatever prioritization framework you have, then you prioritize them, then you'll be able to, I would say, like estimate and say, hey, this is how much time it would take. And as a PM, then you'll be able to I guess like based on the value, I would say how confident you are, the priority of it, and also how much effort and time it would take, and you'll be able to kind of like build your roadmap accordingly. I don't know if that answered your question.
All right. Yeah, I think that was a good answer. And also in the interest of time, I think now we can proceed to the last part. So thank you all for your questions and your great answers, Emily. And I would say this is the end for today. We'd also like to mention that we are hiring and have APM and PM roles open. And you can apply through the link on the screen. And I think this will be shared in the chat as well. And you can always visit our LinkedIn to see open positions there. And also, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to our newsletter, where we share insights and our experience about product management. And next week, we have Millie, who will have a talk on building products from ideation to launch that are set for success. So feel free to join again. And we have also more exciting meetups coming up. So if you want to stay up to date, feel free to join our meetup group and subscribe to our YouTube and LinkedIn channels. And also, if you have any suggestions who we should invite next, or maybe you would like to become a speaker yourself, please feel free to reach out to us. And yeah, thank you very much, Emily, for the interesting talk. And thank you to our audience for joining us tonight. And we hope to see many of you next time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Have a good rest of your day.